Welcome to this video. We're going to do a study on the Sibyl because I think it's important. You know, when we understand our Bible and we understand the prophets, the Hebrew prophets, and how God put the Spirit of Christ in them to prophesy about the coming of Christ, we kind of understand and believe, and we have faith in the Bible. But as I've gone deeper and deeper into this, I've come to understand that God also has put prophecy in other people, such as the Sibyl. And as you'll see on the screen, a definition of a Sibyl is one of a number of women regarded as oracles or prophets by ancient Greeks and Romans. So the Sibyl is a seer, and they were always female. So we're going to have a look at this Wikipedia page, and they seem to be split into different, wherever their location was geographically in the ancient world, they were regarded as belonging to a sect of wherever their location was. So it says Sibyls were prophetesses or oracles in ancient Greece. The Sibyls prophesied at holy sites. The Sibyl at Delphi has been dated to as early as the 11th century BC by Pausanias, when he described local traditions in his writings from the 2nd century AD. At first there appears to have been only a single Sibyl. By the 4th century BC there appear to have been at least three more: Phrygian, Etherian, and Hellespontine. By the 1st century BC there were at least 10 Sibyls located in Greece, Italy, the Levant, and Asia Minor. So the name is derived, again, as we looked into it, she's basically a prophet. She's a seer. And there's quite a lot of mystery surrounding them. The first known Greek writer to mention a Sibyl here, Testimony of Plutarch, says, "The Sibyl with frenzied mouth, uttering things not to be laughed at, unadorned and unperfumed, yet reaches to 1,000 years with her voice by aid of God." So let's just skip through and get into it. So we have the Sumerian Sibyl, the Cumaean Sibyl. The Sibyl who is most concerned with the Romans was the Cumaean Sibyl, located near the Greek city of Naples. She is said to have sold the original Sibylline books to Tarquinius Superbus, the last king of Rome. In Virgil's 4th Eclogue, the Cumaean Sibyl foretells the coming of a saviour, possibly a flattering reference to the poet's patron Augustus. Let's have a look at who Tarquinius Superbus is. The legendary 7th and final king of Rome, reigning 25 years until the popular uprising. Let's click on that. He died 495 BC. Legendary 7th and final king of Rome, reigning 25 years until the popular uprising that led to the establishment of the Roman Republic. So this is ancient Rome, and what was it? Was it founded something like 700 BC? I'll have to look at that properly. So they were originally kings. Obviously, it's a city-state, when Rome was more of a city-state before it became an empire. commonly known as Tarquin the Proud. So what's the date again? 495 BC. So this is like kind of around the time of when Cyrus brought the Jews back into the Holy Land after this 70-year exile, when Nebuchadnezzar took them away. Ancient accounts of the regal period mingle history and legend. Okay, we'll get this. We're kind of digressing with this, but the Cumaean Sibyl sold the original Sibylline books to this king. So 495. In the Cumaean Sibyl foretells the coming of a saviour, possibly a flattering reference to the poet's patron Augustus. Christians later identified this saviour as Jesus. So just to go quickly, we have the Delphic Sibyl. She was a woman who prophesied before the Trojan Wars, the 11th century BC. She was noted by Pausanias. So it says the Delphic Sibyl would have predated by hundreds of years. Priestess of Apollo acted at the oracle from around the 8th century BC. So what I'm saying is, it seems to me like Satan's got his sorcerers, his idolaters, but it seems to me that God has had his people who have prophesied against them, and you'll have a king of an area, like we just looked at that Roman king, and say these Roman kings, they'll be entrenched in their traditions of their paganism that Satan's deceived them into, and then God will raise up a prophet, and in the case of these Sibyls, they were female, so that he will give prophecy to them, and they will deliver these prophecies to these kings, very similar to how we've read in the Bible, where we have the Hebrew prophets who were going and giving prophecies about the coming of Christ, and how if they didn't repent of their sins, they would be destroyed. And it seems like there was a very similar thing going on amongst the Gentiles. That's kind of this whole other area where God has worked within the kingdoms of the heathen, like it says in the book of Daniel, that God rules in the kingdoms of the heathen. What can happen is, you see, when you come into these avenues, you could think that it's all pagan, that these Sibyls were pagans just the same as the culture that they were within. But when I've read these prophecies of the Sibyls, it's very similar to the biblical prophecies that we're used to. Then we've got this. Was there anything I missed here? Then we've got this Erythraean Sibyl. It's again, Erythrea is in Italy. Or is it? Let me just double check that. You might tell me I'm wrong. It's in Greece. Town in Ionia. No, it'll be in Greece, won't it? Etruscan. I'm thinking of Etrusca, which is in Italy, right? Ionia was an ancient region of the western coast of Anatolia, to the south of present-day Izmir, Turkey. Right. So this is near where Constantinople came to be, if I'm right. Okay. Ionia. Okay, so Constantinople's here. Ionia's here. So, we're used to the 7 churches of Asia, which were kind of around this coast here. Okay. So there were Sibyls all over the ancient world is what we're saying. Prophets of God all over the ancient world. Hellespontine Sibyl or Trojan Sibyl. The Libyan Sibyl. So we have this, as we can see here, it's going into like this pagan. There seems to be some sort of pagan link. There's links with paganism, but from the scriptures, I've not seen the practice of paganism. But they seem to be. If we look here, we read about this Libyan Sibyl. The so-called Libyan Sibyl was identified with prophetic priestesses presiding over the ancient Zeus Ammon. So Zeus is Baal. Presiding over the ancient Zeus oracle at the Siwa oasis in the western desert of Egypt. The oracle here was consulted by Alexander, that'll be the Great, after his conquest of Egypt. The mother of the Libyan Sibyl was Lamia, the daughter of Poseidon. Again, there's this pagan thing where there was, all these nations were pagans, like in the image of Nebuchadnezzar, the dream. Persian Sibyl, again, also called Babylonian Sibyl, is said to have foretold the exploits of Alexander the Great, also named Sambeth. She was reported to be of the family of Noah. The Phrygian Sibyl, Samaean Sibyl, the Tiburtine Sibyl, whose seat was in the town of Tibur, modern Tivoli. Tivoli? Northeast of Rome. Okay. So it seems to suggest that some of these Sibyls were worshipped as goddesses. Let's read this bit. An apocalyptic pseudo-prophecy exists attributed to the Tiburtine Sibyl, written 380 AD. So the dates, they often get the dates wrong, but we'll carry on. But with revisions and interpolations added at later dates, it purports to prophesy the advent of a final emperor named Constans, vanquishing the foes of Christianity, bringing about a period of great wealth and peace, ending paganism and converting the Jews. After vanquishing Gog and Magog, the emperor is said to resign his crown to God. This would give way to the Antichrist. So as I'm reading this name here should say Constantine the Great, shouldn't it? Around 300, he subjected three kings, Maxentius, Maximius, and Licinius, and he united east and west of Rome. And he did a coup d'etat of the Christian churches and convened the 325 AD Council of Nicaea. So, that date wouldn't make any sense, 380 AD. because this has all already happened. It wouldn't be a prophecy. The emperor is said to resign his crown to God and give way to the Antichrist, that is exactly right. This would give way to the Antichrist. Ippolito d'Este rebuilt the Villa d'Este at Tiber, the modern Tivoli, from 1550 onward, and commissioned elaborate fresco murals. Okay, so it's saying that it commemorates the birth of Christ. Okay, so that's pretty much this page done. Again, this text we have are what is called Sibylline oracles, a widely attested phenomenon in the ancient world. They are found invariably in epic Greek hexameters. But the phenomenon was not particular to Greece. Many of the alleged Sibyls were Asiatic, and their type of prophecy is widely assumed to have come to Greece from the east. Although there is no clear evidence to support or refute this view. Okay, so we know the word Sibyl means seer. The text isn't really telling us that at the moment. So, with this bit where it says Ovid tells us that she was granted by Apollo that she might live as many years as there were grains of sand on the seashore. A lot of it, because it was BC, the world was completely under paganism. Christ hadn't come to destroy the works. I mean, Christ basically destroyed the ancient world. We have all these. Rome is a good example. You have this modern city of Rome, but within Rome you have ancient Rome. There's like the ghost of ancient Rome's there, but it's all been reduced to rubble. You had all the temples that were there to Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, their pagan trinity, Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, and they would have. We're used to the Greco-Roman style temples, and then people would enter these temples. There would be an enormous idol, and they would go and bring their sacrifices, and it was a polytheistic religion. So everything that was recorded by the ancient world BC was within the context of paganism. It kind of reminds me of in the book of Acts. You have Paul and Barnabas. They went out evangelizing, and they were I wouldn't say mistaken, but the people there received them as these gods. They thought that they were kind of like Jupiter, come down to earth to the people. It was like I can't put my mind onto what particular chapter and verse it is. But I'm pretty sure there's that section in Acts where they tried to paganize Paul. He'd come to. Do you know what? I'm going to type that in. I can't just not tell us exactly where it is. Paul is taken as Jupiter. Is that right? Jupiter? Here we are. Because when we're reading about this stuff, see, sometimes people start reading this and then they think this is all pagan. But if we're kind of mature about it, and we have like if we exercise caution, we can deepen our understanding of context of what we have. So there we go. Barnabas they called Zeus. Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes because he was the chief speaker. Acts 14:12. This is the context. I see the Sibylline oracles and the Sibyl in. Like, the whole purpose of me I'm learning as I go along. But if people want to learn along with me, then great. Um, I think there's a lot of rejection of things off the back of some kind of predisposed idea as to what things are without any kind of investigation. The visit of Here we are. The visit to Lystra and Derbe. In Lystra, there sat a man crippled in his feet, who was lame from birth and had never walked. This man was listening to the words of Paul, who looked intently at him and saw that he had faith to be healed. In a loud voice, Paul called out, "Stand upon your feet." And the man jumped up and began to walk. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices in the Lycaonian language. "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. The priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, brought bulls and wreaths to the city gates, hoping to offer a sacrifice along with the crowds. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul found out about this, they tore their clothes and rushed into the crowd, shouting, "Men, why are you doing this? We too are only men, human like you. We are bringing you good news that you should turn from these worthless things to the living God, who made heaven and earth and sea and everything in them. In past generations he let all nations go their own way, yet he has not left himself without testimony to his goodness. He gives you rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling your hearts with food and gladness." Even with these words, Paul and Barnabas could hardly stop the crowds from sacrificing to them. So I think if we look at this context of what happens here, that people who are completely ingrained within their own idolatry, the context that they are receiving the miracles of Barnabas and Paul were in the context of their pagan religion. And I think this is why, as we looked into on Wikipedia, the Sibyls and the context that they've been given, handed down to us, is in the same way. The prophecies that the Sibyls were given were very meticulous and precise, pertaining to what would come to pass within that particular kingdom of those peoples. And so that they thought that they were, here it is, look, the goddess Sibyl. It says the Sibyl is always depicted as an aged woman. However, she did not ask for youth, so she remained for thousands of years as a shriveled, shrunken woman. That's the kind of paganization of it all. According to Heraclitus, she reaches through thousands of years with her voice. That's prophecy. She reaches through thousands of years with her voice. Her prophecy was even said to continue after death, while her soul revolved in the face of the moon. Paganized again. This is the local paganized legend of these people. She was sometimes thought to be intermediate between the divine and human state. That's interesting, because that's kind of what a born again believer is. If we're born again, aren't we between the divine and the human state? A coin from Eritrea. Is it Eritrea? I'm terrible at these names. Eritrea refers to her as Sibylla, the goddess Sibyl. In Jewish tradition, she was said to be a daughter of Noah. Again, we've kind of looked at that on Wikipedia. So there's an interesting section here on the Cumaean Sibyl. If I just fast forward to the Cumaean Sibyl. Nature of Sibylline oracles. The most characteristic feature of Sibylline oracles is the prediction of woes and disasters to come upon mankind. In the words of the Erythraean Sibyl, the Sibyl was foreseeing on behalf of men hardships difficult to bear. In this they show some similarity to the Old Testament prophets, since from remote times the prophets prophesied war, famine, and plague for many countries and for great kingdoms. Further, like the prophets, their words of doom are often directed against specific peoples and cities, and occasionally at least a ray of hope does penetrate their message, indicating restoration after the destruction. The disasters are due to the wrath of, and it says the gods, again going back to Acts 14, which can be incurred by ritual offences, but also especially in the Jewish Christian oracles by ethical violations. Fragments of the pagan Sibyls which have survived are relatively brief and describe either the Sibyl herself and her relationship with the gods, especially Apollo, again paganization of it. We'll keep going. Okay, I'm looking for the Cumaean Sibyl, Roman Sibylline oracles. Okay, so that we'd already looked at that on Wikipedia. The most famous collection of Sibylline oracles in antiquity was the official one at Rome. Legend places the origin of these oracles in the time of Tarquinius Priscus. This probably indicates the Romans had acquired a collection of oracles in Greek hexameters before the fall of the monarchy, which we looked at, which was it 495 BC? These oracles were entrusted to special keepers, first 2 men, then 10, finally 15. They were consulted only in time of crisis for the state, and the consultation had to be authorized by a decree of the Senate. That's really interesting. So maybe there was like a war going on or a plague. It's like, quick, let's have a look for the Sibylline oracles and have a see what it says in there. No other body of literature was accorded such official authority in the Greco-Roman world. When the Temple of Jupiter was burnt down in 83 BC, the Sibylline books were destroyed. When the temple was rebuilt 76 BC, oracles were collected from various Sibylline centers, especially Erythrea, which we know is Ionia, which is that sort of west coast of what was Asia Minor, now Turkey. Let's keep going. I want to see this bit about the Cumaean Sibyl. I want to read that bit. So, just a collection of codexes. So for me, this is quite major, really, because it's kind of saying that whatever kingdom was reigning, there were prophets who were going to the kings with prophecies about what would happen to their nations. Okay, so this is all there. Cumaean Sibyl. Okay, finally. Okay, so this is interesting. Cumaean Sibyl brought 9 books of her own prophecies to Tarquinius Priscus, or Priscus. Tarquinius Priscus. Never heard of him before today. who then ruled the Roman state. And she asked 300 didrachms for them. 300 didrachms. She was slighted, so she was dissed, and was not asked what was contained in them. So she consigned 3 of them to the fire. Again, in another approach to the king, she brought forward 6 books and asked the same sum. She was considered of no account, so she went again and burned 3 more. Then a third time she approached, bringing the 3 that were left, and asked the same price, saying that if he did not accept, she would burn them also. Then, they say, the king read them and was amazed. He gave 300 didrachms for them and took them, and he entreated her about the others. When she answered that she did not have the equivalent of what had been burned, and could not know anything of the sort without inspiration, but that sometimes certain people had selected from various cities and regions what they considered necessary and beneficial, and that a collection must be made from them, they did this also with all speed. For that which had been given by God did not escape notice, though it truly lay hidden in a nook. The books of all the Sibyls were deposited in the capital of ancient Rome. Those of the Cumaean were concealed and not released to many, since they expressed what would happen in Italy very precisely and clearly. But those of the others were known to all. I'll read a bit more. Those of the Erythraean have as superscription this name by which she is called, derived from the region, but the others are not inscribed as to what belongs to whom, but are not distinguished. Now, Firmianus. Now, Firmianus, a not inconsiderable philosopher and priest of the aforementioned capital, looking toward Christ our eternal light, set forth in his own works what had been said by the Sibyls about the ineffable glory, and capably refuted the absurdity of Greek error. His powerful commentary was in Latin, but the Sibylline verses were set forth in Greek. That this may not appear incredible, I will provide a testimony of the aforementioned man as follows. When the Sibylline verses found with us can easily be despised by those who are knowledgeable in Greek culture, not only because they are easily available for things which are rare are thought valuable, but also because not all the verses preserve metrical accuracy. He has a rather clear argument. This is the fault of the secretaries, who did not keep pace with the flow of speech, or even were ignorant, not of the prophetess, for the memory of what has been said ceased with the inspiration. With regard to this, even Plato said that they describe many great things accurately while knowing nothing of what they say. For my part, therefore, I will set forth as much as possible of what has been handed on in Rome by the elders. Now she expounded about God who had no beginning as follows. One God, the Creator. One God who alone rules, exceedingly great, unbegotten. But God alone, one highest of all, who made heaven, sun, stars and moon, and fruitful earth and waves of water of sea. Who alone is God, abiding as indomitable Creator. He himself established the shape of the form of mortals. He himself mixed the nature of all, begetter of life. Which she said, meaning either that they joined by coming together into one flesh, or that he made both the world under heaven and man from the 4 elements which are opposed to each other. I mean, that's interesting, the last sentence, because I've got other texts which say about man being made from 4 elements. So, being water, fire, earth, and what was the other one? Air. What's interesting to me is it says here that Plato knows about them. With regard to this, even Plato said that they describe many great things accurately while knowing nothing of what they say. So Plato is credited with having an idea of this idea of God which can be matched to the Old Testament God of the Jews. Now, because Plato seems to predate the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament translation, it was always my idea that there were some Jewish synagogues that had scriptures in Hebrew, which maybe Plato had access to, which he had read, and therefore made his mind up about certain things pertaining to the religion of the Jews, the prophets of the Jews. But it seems now to me also that he regarded the things of the Sibyl and had access to the writings of the Sibyl, which is interesting because a lot of the time, because Plato was a very dominant philosopher within the time of first century Christianity, and people who had been um, evangelized to were trying to reconcile the gospel with Plato and the things that they had already known. Because if you were an intelligent, educated person in the ancient world, you were sent off to study what the philosophers thought. Okay, so I mean that's about it for the introduction to what a Sibyl is, and I'm going to go into the book in the next video, just to keep the video time down. So